On December 17, 1943, President Roosevelt signed the Magnuson Act, repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. This year marks the 80th anniversary of this historic event. Today, we hold this conference to celebrate the tremendous social progress since the repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese Exclusion Act was the first and the only federal law that banned immigration entirely based on race and ethnicity. Repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act was the first step toward ending the discrimination in immigration policy and a milestone in the long journey of realizing the American ideal that all men are created equal. In 1965, President Johnson signed the landmark Immigration and Nationality Act that eliminated racial discrimination in immigration and transformed America into the greatest example of tolerance and diversity. In 2011 and 2012, both the US Senate and House passed a resolution, respectively, expressing regret for the passage of the Chinese Exclusion Act and other anti-Chinese legislation enacted over the subsequent 60 years. These two resolutions were initiated by a coalition of Chinese and Asian American civic organizations under the 1882 Project and were co-sponsored by Senator Scott Brown and Senator Dianne Feinstein in the Senate and by Representative Judy Chu and 47 representatives in the House. On May 20th, 2021, President Biden signed the COVID-19 Hate Crime Act that passed through the Congress with strong bipartisan support. On June 13, 2022, President Biden signed the commission to study the potential creation of a National Museum of Asian Pacific American History and Culture Act, which passed unanimously in both the House and the Senate. This marked the first step toward integrating the Asian American experiences permanently into American history. On June 15, 2023, Representative Krishnamoorthi, I hope I pronounced that correctly, he was just here, and his colleague introduced the Bicameral Hate Crime Commission Act of 2023 to provide much-needed equal protection for Asian American communities against discrimination and violence. We hold this conference to pay tribute to Pearl S. Buck and the Citizen Committee for their contribution to repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act. More than 80 years ago, Ms. Buck, a Nobel Prize winner, and her husband, Mr. Richard J. Walsh, established the Citizen Committee to repeal the Chinese Exclusion Act after China became America's ally fighting against Japan. The committee organized a concerted effort to lobby Congress to repeal the Chinese Exclusion Act. She testified in Congress and reminded everyone that democracy is a symbol of the pride for Americans. However, democracy requires human equality and fairness, and the Chinese Exclusion Act is contrary to the spirit of democracy and must be repealed. On October 11, 1943, President Roosevelt urged Congress in a letter to correct this historic mistake by repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act. The Chinese American community will forever remember and be grateful to Pearl S. Buck's contribution and President Roosevelt's leadership in repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act. We hold this conference to celebrate the significant contribution of Chinese Americans to the United States. The Senate Resolution 201 in 2011 recognized the Chinese immigrants' contribution to Americans' economic foundation in the 19th century, according to a 2021 report by the Committee of 100. Approximately 5.3 million people in the U.S. are of Chinese descent, with 75% being American citizens. In 2017, there were over 160,000 Chinese American-owned businesses in the U.S., generating approximately $240 billion in revenue and supporting 1.3 million jobs. Additionally, numerous Chinese American scientists, including 7 Nobel Prize winners, made a significant contribution in a wide variety of scientific disciplines. Leading computer chip makers NVIDIA and AMC, pivotal in the AI revolution, are both led by Chinese Americans. On December 20th, 2018, Congress passed the Chinese American World War II Veterans Congressional Gold Medal Act to recognize the Chinese Americans' honorable service to the U.S. since the Civil War. A congressional gold medal was awarded collectively to about 20,000 Chinese Americans who fought for the U.S. during World War II. About 40% of these Chinese American veterans were not U.S. citizens at the time. We hold this conference to prevent history from moving backward. While the Chinese Exclusion Act may be a relic of the past, its legacy continues to reverberate today. In the 19th century, the exclusion of Chinese immigrants was justified by belief that they were an unassimilatable race, incapable of becoming Americans. Today, Chinese Americans and Asian Americans face resurgent anti-Asian sentiment, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic. Several states have enacted legislation restricting the purchase of real estate by Chinese nationals, reminiscent of the alien land laws that followed the Chinese Exclusion Act. We hold this conference to remind ourselves that we must actively participate in the American democratic process. The core principle of American democracy is a self-governance by individuals of equal standing. As articulated beautifully by Abraham Lincoln, government of the people, by the people, and for the people. When faced with discriminatory legislation that targets our community, we must proactively prevent issues before they arise, intervene during the legislative process, and persistently work to repeal such laws after their passage. In a transparent and participatory democracy, we must project our self-political power through voting, contribute to social progress through civic engagement, and participate in the decision-making process. To be overlooked is to be powerless and voiceless. We hold this conference to build a brighter future for all Americans. 60 years ago, Dr. King delivered his inspiring I Have a Dream speech and asserted that the promissory note of all men are created equal in the Declaration of Independence was marked with insufficient funds for people of color. We stand in solidarity with Dr. King and refuse to accept that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt, and reaffirm our commitment to the shared American dream, where every individual is judged not by the color of their skin or national origin, but by the contents of their character. The concept of becoming American has evolved from wasp assimilation to the melting pot, and today, the celebration of diversity. This evolution bears witness to the vitality, tolerance, and the strength of the founding principle of this visionary nation. Ultimately, America was founded on a set of principles, namely equality, life, liberty, and governed by the consent of the governed. Therefore, being America is solely based on one's allegiance to these founding principles and the Constitution, rather than based on any heritage such as lineage, race, skin color, ethnicity, religion, country of origin, etc. The future of this great nation lies in making it an example of shared prosperity by people from diverse culture and civilization under the Constitution within a multi-ethnic democracy. The collective wisdom of all civilizations surpasses that of any single one. And achieving this vision is not only in the best interest of all Americans, it represents a new milestone for humanity. This is why we're gathering today on Capitol Hill to celebrate the social progress since repealing the Chinese Exclusion Act, to prevent history from moving backwards, reaffirm our allegiance to the American ideal and our commitment to unite all Americans of all communities to build a more perfect union that guarantees justice and equality for all. The Joint Conference Planning Committee wants to express its gratitude and appreciation to all contributing organizations and individual participants in this event,